This is a true crime podcast. It contains adult themes and content and may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
When a guard would stop and talk to you, you used to stand back and you would yell so people could hear what you were saying to that guard as they walked by or within the vicinity.
But he knew what a convict was going to do before they thought of it themselves. He'd just been around that long, and he was tough.
They'd find Sprocky in about every conceivable place you could imagine, which we would, of course, dump.
They'd wait until everybody was locked up, and he would open his door, run down to cell one, and get a bugler can full of Sprocky and take it back to his cell.
She had a kind of a hypnotic power. There were a great many wild cats around the penitentiary, and most people couldn't get near them. But she would stand in the doorway of the cell house and say, "Kitty, kitty, kitty," and those cats would go to her.
Welcome, everyone, to another special Stool Pigeon Saturday, and special because I'm here again. I'm so excited, and we are excited to welcome back our Education Specialist Suzanne Squires.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
I'm
How
happy
are you?
to be here.
Yay.
Very excited.
Yeah.
Another juvenile
Yes.
that spent time at the old Idaho Penitentiary.
I can't wait to hear about it.
And I love it because there's a great connection that Anthony made that when he shared his
Yeah.
something like that.
This
Yeah.
week's episode on Tuesday, it was all about Bernard O'Neill and my half of the episode, and he happens to be a mentor of Suzanne's topic for today.
That's right. And my topic for today is James Green Whitaker is his name. And he was born in 1901, September 2nd, 1901, in Utah, Box Elder County, Utah, which is probably close to the Idaho border.
Yeah, it's
northern
pretty
Utah.
close, yeah.
And he was one of 4 children, born to Nancy, his mother, who was born in North Carolina, and David, his father, who was born in Utah. And actually, they had They had a set of twins first in 1899, and it was a boy and girl, a little Sarah and David, and they died at birth. And so Jimmy was the next one born in this family, and then he also has a younger brother by the name of Willis. Okay. So Jimmy's quite an interesting young man. He and his family lived in a kind of a remote farm out in eastern Idaho, and it was called Serilda, Idaho. I don't even know if that's the name of the town anymore, but it's near Ashton, Idaho.
Okay.
It's interesting because his story starts when he was asked to stay home one day to help his mom with the laundry. Mm-hmm. So the story has it that Dad wanted to go work in the fields, and Jimmy wanted to go with him, and his dad encouraged him to stay home and help his mother with the laundry. Well, Jimmy didn't want to stay home and do the laundry. So sad to say, I'm going to read you the article from the Teton Chronicle that kind of talks about what happened with his mom and him on that day, on Thursday, October 3rd, 1912. So it goes, Mrs. Whitaker was doing the family washing, and with her was her 2 little boys, aged 8 and 12. The eldest boy would not turn the washer fast enough, and was requested by his mother to turn it faster. This he refused to do. And then, after carrying out a bucket of water, he refused to work more. His mother carried out a bucket of water, and when returning to the room, met the boy with a shotgun that appeared to be in the house and loaded. The mother demanded the boy put the gun down, which he refused to do, and told her that if she came closer, he would shoot, which he proceeded to do, blowing off the top of his mother's head.
Oh my gosh.
So he really didn't want to do the laundry, did he?
Oh.
I've been telling something akin to that story, but that is just horrible. This is the worst.
I don't think I ever had the details until I looked it up in the newspaper.
Oh man.
So that was a very, very crazy occurrence. After he committed the crime, he got on his horse. He kind of rode off the ranch there and hid out in the hills for a while, but he did come back, and that was when he was in the house actually then when his dad found him. So the Idaho State's, he admitted freely that he killed his mother. So he didn't deny it. He said, yes, I did that. And then he said, I didn't want to work in the house, and that was just, he says, I don't want her to whip me anymore. Whoa. So he was jailed then in Fremont County for the crime, and on November 14th, 1912, a month later, he was convicted of murder in the second degree and sentenced 10 to 50 years. So back then, if you think about it, there's no juvenile detention centers. There was a center at St. Anthony's, right, which was originally started as a boys' school and eventually housed young boys and girls for juvenile crimes. But at this point, that was not an option for him. So the only documentation that we have that he came to the old Idaho Penitentiary was in a warden's report, the 1911-1912 warden's report. They indicated by age how many inmates they were taking in at the time. And under the aged received 10 to 15, it was that they had admitted one, and that was probably Jimmy. Right. So he arrives here, and from what we know, I believe, was he housed in Two House for a while, in the North Cell House, or was he?
I believe so.
Okay.
It sounds like they tried to sell him with trustees, with somebody who, not a violent criminal, but
and I think
respected.
Right, exactly. And I do think that they did try to keep him away from the general population as much as they could, because they did realize that this is probably not a good thing to have this young person seeing and being around other inmates that are, pretty hardened criminals.
Yeah.
Right?
I know Patrick Murphy writes about him, and he's just like, who is this little boy that's here? And other inmates kind of just explained this little boy in the prison yard. And
right. So actually, when he came here, he became he was very noted in the psychological community out in the United States. There were other doctors and physicians that were very interested in why this little boy would commit such a heinous crime. Right. And so there was one, Dr. Lyman, I believe, and he visited Jimmy on November 20th. So shortly after Jimmy's here. And he is a psychiatrist who assesses the competence of defendants in a court. So he was super interested in Jimmy and came and visited with him. And he is quoted as saying, the boy has no remorse, a moral degenerate, will always be a menace to society and must be kept in an institution. Wow. So it was a pretty heavy, just again saying that this kid is really bad and we need to keep him locked up. Right. So, and I don't think that the warden or any of the guards or anybody knew really what to do with this little guy. Right. Yeah. What are we going to do with him every day? Yeah. The inmates wanted to work. Jimmy wasn't probably going to go out and work. Yeah. So what do you do with this little guy while he's here? So the doctor also noted that the boy's parents were first cousins. Oh. And this might account for the way for his perverted type. So that was kind of an interesting assumption. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. Right. But so again, more things that are kind of not going in Jimmy's favor. Right. Yeah. So this is where kind of this Barney O'Neill enters in, the one that Anthony was telling us about. Lived in North Idaho, and did he embezzle money? What did he do?
He was officially in for making a false report.
Okay.
But he had embezzled, and he had taken in transactions even though his banks were going under and were worthless and all
cook
this.
the books.
He was cooking books and basically embezzling.
Right. But we looked at his mugshot, and he looks like just a fun guy. He's got a big smile on his face.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, wow, why are you doing this?
Jolly Irishman. Yes. I really loved him. Yeah.
So he's in the pen at this time, and so he ends up kind of taking Jimmy under his wing. So he is the trustee that Jimmy is given to him in order to kind of keep watch on him, maybe kind of educate him and help him to just become maybe a better person. And he's noted as saying that he thought that Jimmy was a bright young boy. He thought he was kind of developed a little bit mentally beyond his years, but he was kind of physically not very fit, kind of a small little guy, and he had bad teeth. And it's funny that this comes into play a little bit later with another psychiatrist who comes to look at Jimmy and thinks that juvenile delinquents, many of them, one of the things that he notices is that they have bad teeth. So I was like, okay, this is getting a little interesting here. So anyway, they looked at sending him to St. Anthony's. I guess the warden did bring this up, but there were parents from St. Anthony's school who wrote to the warden and said, do not send him to our school. We're afraid of the influence that he could have on our children.
Wow.
So everybody thinks that Jimmy is pretty much a bad seed.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of breaks my heart, right?
Yeah.
You think about this, and you're like, oh my gosh. So anyway, he is detained in the cell, kept away from the other inmates, and it's actually he's actually able to go to the library. So where would the library have been in 1912? Would that have been in one of the cell houses, or
Probably in the administration building
Oh.
is my guess.
Okay.
But,
Sure.
like most things here, it's so hard to document
Right.
from decade to decade what
Right.
building was used for what. So
Well, anyway, so
That's my guess.
that's kind of the way, and that's probably where Mr. O'Neill, Barney, would take him and kind of help educate him. It was a room that was quite quiet, away from everyone else. So, anyway, that was kind of what Jimmy's day was like, just being, going into this room and probably learning and how to be a better person, or even learning some educational components as well. So another president of the New York Juvenile Association, this Charles Hills, he comes to visit Jimmy as well, and he is also talking about the decay of teeth leading to young people having, and I think particularly boys. They don't really talk about girls.
Right.
They talk about bringing, these boys and having this being the cause of their delinquency, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting too, because it's sort of around this time where phrenology is going to come in, or it has come in already, and so they're really trying to figure out like what is it that makes this person this way.
Yeah.
And I think they had it just the opposite, where it's more likely because they had parents who may not have cared for them or didn't teach them correctly.
Totally.
That they had bad teeth and they were juvenile delinquents, but they were so focused on trying to find a root cause, coming up with a type. Like they're sort of the prototypes of the like serial killer profiles
Sure.
and things like that.
But I think they were also looking for something physical. They weren't really
Right.
looking at the emotional or the
Right.
that
Environmental,
environmental
Right.
situations. They were looking for this in what's making these kids bad. Oh, it's their teeth.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that was very interesting. So, because these two well-known people had brought this up, the warden actually allowed him to go to a dentist. And so he does go to a Boise dentist, who then agrees to go ahead and give him, an apparatus to try to help straighten his teeth.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, let's just see if this works.
Right.
Well, really, does it work? Who knows? Over time, Jimmy might have just, become a better person.
Right.
So anyway, but on the way home from one of the trips to the dentist, they allow him to buy a baseball mitt. So this is kind of the thing that we know a lot about Jimmy, and think, that this is probably what was really the neatest thing about his time here, is that the deal was if he could control his temper, then he could be part of the baseball team. And so he was kind of would you think, like maybe a bat boy or something? Or
that's what I've seen him as. Yeah, it was the bat boy. Yeah.
Yeah, so playing baseball was a privilege, and being part of this team was a privilege that they allotted him if he could, keep his anger under control and whatnot. So Mr. O'Neill, Barney, then taught Jimmy manners and tried to really focus on him just being a good person, saying please and thank you or no thank you, or, and trying to better express himself, it sounds like. He wasn't very good at, really telling you what he wanted without getting angry because you didn't understand.
Right.
It's like, how come you can't read my mind? Well,
Right.
you need to tell me what you really need and what you really want. So there was another psychologist in Boise who came and examined Jimmy. This is about 2 years after he's been here. This is 1914. And she said that she finds him mentally normal, except that he has unusual and uncontrollable temper. So even 2 years afterwards, she is, and however she evaluated this, I'm not sure, but that was kind of what she came up with. And at this time, Warden Snook was continuing to keep him apart from the other inmates and just maybe spending time with Barney. And but Barney wasn't here that long, was he?
About a year and 3 months.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
October 1914.
Yeah. So after you've told me that, I wondered who was it then that
Right.
took over this role
Right, yeah.
of his teacher, so to speak. And I never got any information as far as what other inmate took over this role.
Yeah.
But whatever the case, Jimmy did still try to become, it sounds like he's tried to better himself. And then there was a teacher from Boise who actually came in and was actually able to give Jimmy some educational classes, kind of work with him a little bit. So over the years, things are just continuing, I think, to get better for Jimmy. I think he's starting to learn and become a better person. In, 1916, there was another guy from the Navy, another doctor who also came, and still very interested in Jimmy, trying to find out, more about him. And he said that he felt like he was having good treatment under Warden Snook as he could receive at any outside special school. Because at one point they did want to send Jimmy to a school in California that was only for young men of his age who had committed, a pretty serious crime.
Yeah.
But they decided no, that wasn't going to happen. Probably maybe cost to the state, whatever. Right. But they kept him here. And obviously they're making good progress, right? He does appear before the parole board in about April of 1919, but his parole is denied. Oh. So he's only been here, about 7 years?
Yeah, 6-7 years.
7 years, and that first parole is denied. And then he personally appears before the board in 1920, and he is going to speak to the governor at the time and talk about what he did. So he's 19 years old, and he says that without even flinching, he's just standing up there and he's telling his story before the board. And one of the things that they noticed is that he showed no signs of real regret or remorse. And he's telling the details, just kind of the gruesome details, and he's going through it, but they're wondering, wow, has he changed at all? Because he's not really showing any emotion or regret for committing this crime. So they're still, I think, a little bit concerned about what should they do with him and when should we allow him to be paroled. And then there were some letters that came in from his father and some of the surrounding people in their neighborhoods or in their community saying that, they felt like he should be pardoned.
From his father.
His father, right, after the murder of his mother. Yeah, right.
Well, and it's been long enough that, too, he could basically be like, my son's an adult, I don't need to care about him. But there is something to be said about the fact that his father wants to have him back.
Right, right. And the members of the community are willing to accept him back, thinking, could this happen again? But maybe they're just convinced that he's become a better person. Right. So then a conditional pardon is given to him in 1921. Wow. So that's pretty amazing. So he continues to ask for a full pardon over the years, but just a conditional pardon at first. And that really meant that he had to stay within the confines of his community.
Okay.
He couldn't go out, move or whatever. And so he was unskilled, so to speak. And so going back and working on the farm was about all he knew and about, all that he felt comfortable doing. Right. The only problem was at certain times of the year, there were certain jobs like, the harvesting and whatnot was only going to happen in the fall. And then what's he going to do? He could work in the fields in the summer. And then so in the winter, he was looking at going and working on ranches around the area. So he asked to be able to do that. And the contingency was that as long as he contacted the sheriff in that area, that he could go ahead and work, because they really wanted to know where he was at all times. Yeah. So that's kind of his lonely life. Once he leaves here, that's pretty much what he spends the next, 50-some years doing, is just working, ranching, farming, and living in this little community in eastern Idaho. In 1925, though, he does receive a full pardon, but he never does leave eastern Idaho.
Wow.
Does he get married, do you know?
He does not get married. So he dies in 1970 at age 68. Yes. And the census has it that he never married, never had any children, and he is buried right next to his mother in the cemetery there in Fremont County, Idaho. Yeah. So it's like, okay. That is interesting. He had a younger brother, Willis. He also is, according to censuses and whatnot, showed that he also never married. So the Whitaker family
just spent time with each other.
He actually moved. His last census was in San Francisco, California.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Right. So he kind of just decided to get out of Dodge and start over. I never did find anything about what he did for a living or whatnot, but of all indications was that he never married and had children either.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there was one interesting letter that was sent from a neighbor. It was actually a letter to the Idaho Historical Society from a neighbor. His name was Fred Porter, regarding Jimmy and his return to eastern Idaho. And he said, his home was a mile or two from my own, and I didn't know him well until after his release from prison. But I remember vividly the murder incident, which occurred about 1914. Kind of off, but that's okay.
When is this letter from?
This is from 1987.
87. So about 14 years after the prison closed down.
Yes.
We're a historic site.
Right,
Okay, yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. And he dies in 70.
Yeah.
So this is a time after. So anyway, maybe he's just going through some
recollecting.
Yeah, and finds this letter, and he says after his release on parole, he returned to our community and worked for various farmers, including my father. In his later life, he herded sheep for a local man named Singleton. He died about 6 years ago and is buried beside his mother's grave in the Little Ora Cemetery, 5 miles west of Ashton, Idaho. He was an honest man, intelligent, and a good worker. Of course, his life was blighted, and he was shunned by society, never married. He confided somewhat in me concerning the troubles of his life and his time in the penitentiary, where he said he became a trustee. It was a very sad case indeed.
Oh, wow.
So he did become a better person.
Yeah.
Obviously got his anger under control, was able to manage it, and lived and worked where he was born and raised.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
think being a teenager is hard. Being a teenager incarcerated at this prison.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you even imagine?
What type of person would you come out like? Like, that's amazing that there's a letter like this.
Right.
Kind of
Right.
commending his life afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too. And just, so, he obviously made some strides here. And there were obviously inmates that helped him make, and wardens.
Yeah.
Guards probably too, who helped him become a better person and to the point where he could actually be given a full pardon
Yeah. Yeah.
and go back and live where he wanted to be by his father, and I don't know any about the relationship with the father or anything once he moved home or.
Yeah, I do wonder sort of how he might have felt when, like, as he got older, realizing that this is what he did to his mother. Like, was there any remorse that eventually came in? Like, even, and I wonder, though, if he even felt it even when he was in front of the parole board, but didn't know how to express that accurately. If he is sort of as not psychologically developed as these doctors are saying that he is.
Yeah, he's probably rehearsing everything he's going to say over and over and over. He's
Right.
That's all he's thinking about are the words he's saying. It's not like the emotion he puts behind it or anything like that. Yeah,
Right. Kind of robotic, but yet maybe he was really, but yet it is interesting that he could never really probably develop any relationships with other people.
Yeah.
Not just women, but maybe, just he was kind of a loner,
Yeah.
doing his own job and just happy to be not at the Idaho State Penitentiary, right?
Yeah. So you are a retired school teacher,
Yes, I
Suzanne.
am.
How would you feel about this? If something like this happened today, like how would you respond to a situation like this? Because I know there were like teachers that came in from the outside, from local Boise schools to come and teach Jimmy. Would you ever be kind of proactively involved in something like that?
I think it would be good on a one-on-one situation. I couldn't imagine actually going into a juvenile detention center and working with a group, maybe a small group. I think a large group might be really overwhelming, but I think if you can work with children one-on-one, I think you have a lot better opportunity to, maybe make a difference, maybe really be able to educate and see what's going on. When you're in a group, it's hard to assess how everybody's taking in all the information. At least one-on-one, if a child doesn't understand, they can say, "Hey, I don't get that. Can you tell me again, or can you help me with that again?" And I think that's so much easier. So I could see that in a one-on-one situation or small group, but it would be difficult for these people that do go in and educate our young people today who are in these large facilities. And I don't really know much about how they do educate them, but I think it would be very challenging, and almost difficult,
How did you feel when you first heard about Jimmy's story? Like as a retired, fourth grade teacher, right around this age range.
Wow.
Could you imagine something like this with your students?
I
or
can't
was it
imagine anyone. I mean, for me, that's just
Right.
not even within my realm. But I think as I've worked with so many students over the years, you see kids who are angry and who don't have really good home situations, and not that it's ever, all right to be violent, but yet, living remotely on a farm like Jimmy, loaded guns and things like that, that was just part of your home. You could just go out and, maybe go hunt for something, deer, whatever. But so I don't know. I think that there must have been something environmentally, emotionally really wrong with him to be able to go ahead and commit a crime like that.
And I wondered too if his sort of cause and effect sort of hadn't been fully developed yet, that like, you know, you go out and you shoot rabbits and stuff and you don't see them on maybe quite the same level as your parents. And then when you aim a gun at your mother, there isn't that like, oh, if I shoot her, she dies. Like there just may not have been fully connected, is because of how as you were saying it, just how like almost casual he was about it, like almost like he didn't fully understand the seriousness of guns and gun safety and
right. But the fact that he came back after he committed the crime and he never really denied it, you know what I mean, admitted to doing it. Yeah. So there's that emotional part that was definitely not developed in him, that maybe it came from his bad teeth. I kind of doubt that, but you know what I mean? Yeah. And I wonder how that affected his brother. Yeah. You know, I wonder what the repercussions were for him at home, being there with just his dad, and then, you know, what he ended
and I
up
wonder
doing.
if the brother had any temper issues as well, because not only like you watch your brother go through it and then your brother's gone, but then you also sort of have that understanding that your brother is the one who killed your mother. Like there would be, I can imagine there would be a ton of anger there. So I wonder, do you remember in the census how long they sort of were together before the brother left for San Francisco?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because that would have been it. Like, if, I don't know, it'd be interesting if, like, as soon as the brother came back, well, his younger brother would have been about 16,
well, he was
17?
2 years younger than
Jimmy.
2 years.
Yeah. So he could have left.
Right, he could have already been gone.
As soon as Jimmy came back. Yeah. I wonder, that'd be interesting to know.
Right, and, you know, small communities like that, they're very close-knit, and they probably don't speak ill of each other, so no one maybe ever really felt like they needed to share. If anything, you know, continued on the wrong vein with the dad and his brother Willis, you know. Yeah. But it sure would be interesting.
Yeah. Really interesting.
Family dynamics are very, very important in our growing up.
Yeah. As we all may or may not be dealing with this holiday season, right?
Right. Family dynamics.
Dynamics.
Yes. So anyway, so I think those two, the Oscar Baker that I talked about last time and Jimmy, were our two youngest inmates here, and then the rest are kind of the teenage, you know, years and doing just silly teenage things for the most part. You know.
I think that's what is so crazy about Jimmy, is that it's like it's his mother. It's where other crimes, it's teenagers just doing with friends doing
silly teenage things. But he made reference to the fact that she whipped him. You know, in that first little interview that he did with the newspaper, and whether or not that's true, and whether or not that is no reason to do what he did. You know, you just walk away. Say, I'm not doing the laundry.
I love to tell the fourth grade students when they come in, because they're around that same age, they're 10, 11, so I tell them both Oscar's and James's story, and I say, so from now on, if your mother asks you to do the laundry, are you going to do it? And they're always like, yes! So
they're very agreeable, aren't they?
Scare them into submission.
Right. Yes.
All right.
That was awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Anything else you want to add, or?
No, I just loved the connection that we made with Barney and Jimmy's teacher, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's lots of connections here at the old pen that I think as we delve deeper into these lives of men and women, they kind of start to, there's a little bit of crossover, and it's like, wow.
Well, and when you said, and this may not be connected at all just because we couldn't find, but when you said Singleton and that it was someone who'd raised sheep, we just did Barbara Ann Singleton earlier this season, and at least her second husband, I don't know if her first husband was involved in it, but he was a sheep herder. Yeah.
Ooh.
And so that would be super, so she's from Twin. But they did say one of her husbands, while she was incarcerated for I think the third time, her husband was away doing sheep herding, and then he'd be back in Boise later.
Oh my heavens!
That would be
amazing.
That'd be so wild.
What a connection!
I don't know if that would be true, but that would be amazing.
That would be 3 connections in this one.
Episode,
right?
That'd be so cool.
But what do you think the odds of us finding something about that in the Idaho Statesman are pretty slim, small, right? We're going to have to go for journals, personal diaries, and things like that. Thank goodness.
I love that.
Yeah, but thank goodness for the Idaho Statesman and the Chronicle and all these newspapers, because honestly, we don't get much from the warden's reports except, age entered, and then we find out all of this from the Idaho Statesman.
Because I didn't know any of those details about Jimmy's story.
Mm-hmm. I was amazed.
When you told me about his parents being related, it was...
I know.
Whoa, that was a revelation to me. I
Yeah.
thought I knew everything about this little kid, and that was like, okay, I got to go back and...
Yay, I told Anthony something he doesn't know.
See, isn't it
Yay,
exciting?
That makes me
Anthony
happy.
knows so much.
I know.
You've done so much on this. It's awesome. So
It's great.
work,
And it's wonderful
Suzanne.
that he was so it's sad in a way that he was so well renowned in the U.S. for his crime that other, psychologists and things felt the need to come and
interesting.
find out about him. But I think that whole concept of juvenile, delinquency or juvenile issues and crimes and whatnot was really starting to come to the forefront. And so it was like, wow, we got to find out about this young man
Right.
Right.
and get it down in our books. Yeah. Well, thanks, you guys. It was
thank
fun
you.
again.
Great
Okay.
work. Well,
Woohoo.
if we were to say do your own time, what would you say?
I think I know this time. Do your own number.
Yeah.
And your own chores.
And your own chores.
That's right.
And don't crab about it. Good to see you, Sky.
Good to see you too,
Yeah.
Suzanne.
Good
Love
luck in
it.
Texas.
No, I'll try.
I know. You're getting there.
If you enjoyed Behind Gray Walls, please rate, review, and subscribe so others can find our podcast. If you're interested in more Old Idaho Penitentiary information and to see mugshots of the inmates featured in this episode, follow the Old Idaho Penitentiary on Instagram and Facebook. If you want to learn more about the Idaho State Historical Society and its other sites, follow ID State Historical Society on Instagram or visit history.idaho.gov. If you have a question or comment for the hosts, please email us at behindgraywalls@gmail.com.